Hey everyone, it's Yonnie.
And Gnarly.
And we're here with the saints of the day, who are...
Saints Louis and Zelie Martin.
Woo! Now, you may not know these people, but we're going to tell you all about their story and all about their life. They actually had a pretty funny, pretty cool story of how they met.
Yeah, so Saint Zelie, she was a lace maker, and she lived in France, and she met this woman one day at her shop, and the woman, just said, "Hey, I want you to marry my son." And Zelie's like, "Okay."
Maybe.
And Saint Zelie, she really wanted to be a nun, a religious sister, but she was pretty sick and had poor health, and so she was rejected to be a nun. So she had decided that she was going to get married. So I think that's why she was pretty interested in maybe meeting this guy's son. So that same day, she meets this man on a bridge, and that man is...
Saint Louis Martin!
Saint Louis, yeah.
And so Saint Louis was a man who had wanted to be an Augustinian friar. So he also wanted to be in the religious life. But he got denied, fortunately, actually. And so upon this bridge, they just kind of met, struck up a random conversation. And then they realized that they valued the same things. They had the same Catholic faith, the same love for God. And so, that's going to strike up a little bit of interest in both of them.
Yeah, and actually, Saint Zelie, she heard God speak to her, and she heard him say that this was the man that she was going to marry, which is actually kind of what happened with Yonnie and me. So listen for God's voice.
Yeah, so she listened, and then responded, obviously, to God's voice. And St. Louis also knew that God was telling her to do so and telling him to get married to her as well. So they dated, they got engaged, and 3 months into their engagement, they got married, and they had their reception or their marriage at midnight. So pro tip for all of you that want to get married, if you want to have an inexpensive reception, get married at midnight, just like Saints Louis and Zelie.
Yeah, so Saint Zelie, she was a lace maker, like we said, and she had a very successful business, so successful to the point that Saint Louis quit his job and came to work with her and help her in this business. They ended up having 9 kids. Yeah, it's a lot of kids. 4 of them, unfortunately, passed away when they were babies, and so they had 5 daughters. They had 7 girls and 2 boys. But they had 5 daughters who grew up and lived to be very healthy, great girls. And they all became nuns, which is super crazy.
Yeah, super wild. So the Martins were pretty normal in that they were, just married people. They followed the stock market, which if you follow the stock market right now, it's going bad. But they also read the newspaper, and they just had normal friends. So they had a pretty normal life overall. But what they wanted to do and make sure is that they were loving God first and foremost before all else, and that they were teaching their kids to do the same thing. And so they ended up living very extraordinarily their ordinary lives. About 20 years into their marriage, they had Saint Therese, and unfortunately, after they had Saint Therese, I think it was a couple of months maybe after that, Saint Zelie got sick. She got diagnosed with breast cancer, and pretty soon after that, unfortunately, passed away. After that, a few years later, sicknesses were kind of around the family, and so even Saint Therese would get really, really deathly ill, even to the point of being bedridden.
Saint Louis, he had a novena of masses offered at their local parish for Saint Therese to get better. And of course, the power of prayer, we all know how amazing that is. She was healed, which is amazing.
Yeah, so it goes to show you just how powerful a father's prayers are, especially because he kind of took the responsibility upon himself to care for Saint Therese's physical health and spiritual health by going out of his way to get those novenas prayed for her. So St. Louis saw that the Lord blessed his life because if you think about it, he had a pretty good life. He had an awesome marriage, very holy marriage, and he had incredibly holy daughters as well. And so he saw himself as extremely blessed. So what he did was he said, well, I've had a really great life, but I also want to make sure that my kids, get the grace that they need in order to be holy religious sisters. And so he offered himself as what we would call a victim soul, basically saying, Lord, if there's any chance that I can merit more grace for my daughters, I will even take upon physical suffering if it means that they have that chance. Again, it just goes to show how cool it is that this holy man wanted so deeply for his daughters to be taken care of, especially in their spiritual lives. And he was so happy to do so.
Saints Louis and Zelie, they didn't become saints because all of their daughters became nuns, and they didn't become saints because their daughter is Saint Therese of Lisieux, which is really cool. But they became saints because they desired to do God's will. They sought his will in all things, and they lived out his will in everything that came their way. And this is exactly what holiness is. They, like Yonnie had said, they lived ordinary lives very extraordinarily. And that's why they became saints. So after St. Louis had passed away, many, many years after, they had two miracles attributed to them, with two little children who were very, very sick. And these two children lived in completely different countries and were born at completely different times. And they experienced full healing because of the prayers of Saint Zelie and Saint Louis Martin. And because of those miracles, they were then beatified and then canonized. And so they are officially saints now, which is super awesome. And their family is probably partying up in heaven together. So let us ask for their prayers, for their intercession, to help us really do God's will, and to live our ordinary lives extraordinarily. And that is how we will become saints as well. So, St. Louis and Zelie Martin,
Pray for us. All right, God bless.
Bye guys.